Do we need to see more from the 2023 draft class of the Dallas Cowboys? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. We are answering your Twitter questions today, and we've got some really good ones about Mike McCarthy's play calling, the down roster defensive ends who maybe need to start playing a little bit better. But I got a really good one from Maxwell. He wants to know, is this the least impactful draft class that the Cowboys have had in recent years?
I mean, I think that it's the title of the segment is the best answer here. We need more. We need to see more. We need them to do more. I think it might be, the answer might be yes, but I think it's also not shocking that it's yes, right? Like we drafted two players that play positions that are notoriously needing development, and you drafted all these players onto a roster of a very talented roster of players. So even some of the down roster folks who in previous draft classes may have made more of an impact have a more difficult climb to kind of make an impact. So I mean, I think the answer is yes, but I mean, we shouldn't be shocked by this. Like that was the that was kind of what we bargained for when we drafted these guys. And I do think that the thing that's easy to kind of to look at and to point to is all the previous draft classes the Cowboys have had and all the success they've had. And, it's like they're victims of their own success to a large degree. But at the same time, they've avoided spending high draft picks on specifically defensive tackle and a little bit of deep tight end as well. So it's like at some point they were going to have to dip their toe into these positions in which you don't necessarily get immediate excellent returns, and I think that's what they're kind of going through right now.
Yeah, so defensive tackle, the last defensive tackle they took in the first round was Russell Maryland.
I mean, people have said Tyron Crawford as well, but
I'm saying the first round pick.
I mean, I think Russell Maryland. I mean, we could talk about whether or not some people would say Marcus Spears was technically a defensive end, but and I think he probably was a D tackle. But either way, I don't think that even Spears was the kind of player that they're trying to draft. That's a different type of position. So I would say that really Russell Maryland is probably the last player at that similar position that Mozzie plays.
And if you go to like the tight end position, they've drafted two tight ends inside the top 100 in the last 12 years. And that was Luke Schoonmaker this year. And then it was Gavin Escobar in 2013. They have not drafted that position very high.
No.
And if you look across the league, like all these tight ends, for the most part, outside of the guy that we're going to be facing this week with Detroit, Sam Laporta, most of these guys take a long time to develop. So that part of it's not surprising, but I think you hit on it. Like the Cowboys have been really spoiled that not only have they had great draft classes, but they've had guys that have come in and played great football right away, whether it's Tyler Smith last year. Michael Parsons was an all-pro player his first year in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb, Trayvon Diggs, and Tyler Biadasz were all starters right away for Dallas. 2018, Van Der Esch was a Pro Bowl player as a rookie. Michael Gallup had a really nice season. 2016, you had Zeke, you had Dak Prescott, Anthony Brown, Byron Jones, DeMarcus Lawrence, Zach Martin, Tyron. I mean, we could go on and on. Like the Cowboys have just had this insane run of drafting really good players that had really good starts to their career. Now, if you're asking me, is this the least impactful draft class? I would say the 2019 one is close, Landon, because that's the one the Cowboys took. Get this, a defensive tackle with their first pick, Tristan Hill. They drafted Connor McGovern, who I don't think played at all as a rookie.
His rookie year, he didn't. No.
Yeah. Tony Pollard got like 90 touches as a fourth-round pick. And then it was Mike Jackson, still in the league, playing for Seattle. Joe Jackson, Donovan Wilson, who did not play much as a rookie, Mike Weber, and Jalen Jelks. Now, maybe it's a bad thing to compare the Cowboys to that 2019 draft class, but we have seen these kind of classes before.
Yeah, and again, I think, look, I mean, if you want to compare Tristan Hill to where Mozzie Smith is, we could certainly do that. I mean, I would say that Mozzie is light years ahead of where Tristan Hill was. So, I just think that there's a little bit of impatience here on this. I mean, first of all, like I understand the necessary, pushing now is because you've had some run defensive issues. You would like to see Mozzie become a dominant player there, but he's also been one of your best defensive tackles against the run. I mean, it hasn't been great overall, but he has been one of the better ones you've got. I just think that, these are guys that need just a little bit more time to kind of, especially, for guys like Mozzie in the run game, like there's just so much new that he's seeing that he hasn't seen before. So it's just about kind of his head still swimming. So I think these guys, we start talking about whether or not this is a solid class, at the end of next year and see it where the development is. And that's kind of an idea of whether or not they were worth their draft spot.
In a lot of ways, that 2019 class is a good example of why you should be patient. So even without a first round pick in what was historically a really weak draft, like go look at the first round of that 2019 draft. It's
not just for the Cowboys, but for the NFL overall. Yeah.
You still ended up getting Tony Pollard in the fourth round, who developed into one of the best running backs in the league before his injury. Connor McGovern ended up becoming a 3-year starter for the Cowboys, got a decent contract from the Bills. Donovan Wilson ended up being one of your best safeties. He got a nice contract from the Cowboys. Michael Jackson, someone who didn't make the Cowboys, but ended up becoming a starting cornerback for the Seattle Seahawks. So the Cowboys really got nothing from that class in year one. But by year 2 and year 3, you had 4 NFL caliber players without having a first round pick. So just wait a little bit. Let's see how some of these other guys develop, what Scooney looks like in year 2. What Overshown looks like in year 2, coming back from the injury. Let's see what Deuce Vaughn and Fajoku and Jalen Brooks look like. I'm still somewhat optimistic about this class.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, like we shouldn't be writing off draft classes and when you're especially on a very talented roster where these guys have not gotten a lot of opportunity. Especially these down roster guys have not gotten a lot of opportunity.
And by the way, I know I'm kind of joking here, but don't forget that the Cowboys might have the offensive rookie of the year from this class in Brendan Aubrey, who still has not missed a field goal. Now, he's not going to win it, but he should get some votes. If he goes all year without missing a kick, pretty incredible. That is part of the draft class. We see teams every year spend third, but the Eagles the 49ers spent a third-round pick on a kicker. New England spent a fourth-round pick on a kicker. And the Cowboys have, the best kicker in the NFL right now. I don't think you can deny it.
And they have 2 other guys that are on injured reserve that are undrafted free agents that are really talented young players, and David Dresden, right, and John Stevens Jr., who both were very solid playmaking guys all throughout training camp who unfortunately got injured. So those are 2 more talented guys that you're expected to see next year. So yeah, I think it's just a little bit early to kind of write off this class and think that it's not going to give its worth. There's still plenty of time. If
Mozzie and Scooney and those guys just don't do anything by the end of year 2, that's when I start to get concerned.
Yeah, we can have a conversation then.
I'm not there yet. Let's talk about Mike McCarthy and his play calling in Miami in week 16. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront so you know you're getting a great deal without any hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We wanted to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Lana, let's get to some more questions. We had several about Mike McCarthy and his play calling. A couple of people wanted to know what was the reasoning behind the second and 13 QB sneak, some of the early down runs. What were your thoughts of McCarthy here in this game?
I still haven't gotten an answer on the QB sneak situation. I'm not exactly sure. I think ultimately they were just trying to get some yardage, but I mean, it almost seemed like a broken play to me, to be honest. I do think that the narrative of kind of conservative play calling by McCarthy on the road is something that has legitimacy to it. I kind of felt like he was working against it though. In half the game, it felt like there were times when they were being aggressive when they needed to be. And then a couple of things happened. One, they had a couple, we talked about this already, a couple of different drives that got backed up on their own end zone. And I think that specifically is where you saw Mike really kind of, rein in the offense a little bit just to kind of keep things tight. I also think that it felt like it felt like the offense was almost kind of flirting with disaster execution wise at that point. Yeah. Like there was some false starts, like some balls that kind of went where they weren't supposed to be going. And I do think that kind of made Mike a little bit, hesitant to like, hey, let's attack down the field while we've got, a kind of shaky pass protection and there's Dak seeing a little bit of ghosts going. So I think the idea was to try to protect Dak a little bit, but ultimately I think the Cowboys have got to stop erring on that side of the issue, right? Because the truth of the matter is that, he could have thrown an interception there. They could have had a strip sack or a fumble or that absolutely could have happened. But, the offense kind of losing steam and being anemic is to me more dangerous, right? Like, because even at times when the Cowboys were turnover prone last year, there was moments where you felt like, well, they were more than turnover prone last year. They were turning the ball over pretty regularly, but it felt like that was pretty consistently being covered up by the Cowboys' ability to be explosive and to reach down the field and make up for those plays. And I feel like the Cowboys still have that ability at times, but they're too afraid of turning the ball over, right? Of like giving. I mean, I listen. I think it's not that I feel like they've erred too far the other way, but it feels like at times when things are tight, they're too afraid to kind of get back into that high risk mode. It's weird. It's almost like when the things are at their riskiest and it's like all on the line, Dak's great. The Cowboys offense is aggressive. They go after it. When there's a neutral situation, the Cowboys are great. They go after it. They attack. When things are a little bit tight, like when it's like that area between those two situations where maybe the Cowboys are a little bit behind or the score is tied and the Cowboys need an answer, that's when it feels like the Cowboys offense can't figure out which side of aggressiveness they want to follow.
It's like when that win probability is between like 40 and 60%, where the game is still kind of in the balance. One of the kind of the working things that I've been thinking about is it feels like the Cowboys struggled to play a conservative style of football. And what I mean by that is like when you just need to get 4 yards every single play, it doesn't seem like they can do that. It seems like that's when they
only offense, right? Efficient only, where you don't need to get a big play, but you just need to keep moving the chains a little bit.
It seems like we've seen other teams that have been worse offenses play that style of football and be really successful. Like I think the best version of that would have been like the early Russell Wilson years in Seattle, where every once in a while they would take shots, but they were really good at just keeping the chains moving and burning clock. This team's not very good at it. They're just much better. They are much better if you're like, hey, you have to go out and score 37 points to win this game. Like the Seattle game. That was a perfect example. That game script was, we got to score points every single drive. And the Cowboys called plays and they executed plays like they had to score 37 points. But when they get into these games and it's, hey, we just have to put one touchdown drive together and you need to milk as much clock as you can to give your defense a break, that's when things get a little bit hairy.
Yeah, it's like things get tight, or and actually what ended up happening is the Cowboys really struggle now to get over negative plays in ways that they didn't before. You know, like I mean, look, the Cowboys had negative plays previously, and it was a problem. I think that the Cowboys have reduced the amount of negative plays from last season, but the problem is that it doesn't feel that way because they aren't getting over the negative play drive.
Unless Dak is just being a magician. Like that's the only way they're overcoming some of these. If he's using his legs to get outside the pocket and make plays. Like in structure, they're having a hard time overcoming them.
And the real problem is that, sometimes the Cowboys are doing those penalties and kind of deserve the penalty. And sometimes they're not. Like sometimes the Cowboys are executing fine. They're still getting penalties called on them. Yeah. So the Cowboys have got to find a way to overcome that because, to me, that's like it's going to happen. Like you're going to get penalties. There's going to be a negative play. There's going to be a situation where you throw the ball to Gallup on a smoke screen and he takes a 3-yard loss because the blockers didn't get into him. There's going to be plays where you're behind the chains, and the Cowboys have got to just be a little bit better than they have at least recently at overcoming that and really just attempting to overcome it. That's the really problem, is that it feels like at times they're just giving up, or they're just like, they're too scared to like try too hard and make a mistake. Really.
I will also say, I do wonder if the success from the defense early in the season has messed with them a little bit because earlier in the year, they could just lean on their defense to continue to get stops and they get the ball right back. And if things weren't going perfectly on offense, they'd be okay. But the defense just hasn't been that great over the last month, Landon. Since week 13, 27th in EPA per play, 30th in success rate, 29th in dropback EPA, 30th in dropback success rate, 20th in EPA on runs, 30th in rush success rate. Like this defense just isn't playing anywhere near what we saw in the first half of the year. So that's where I think the offense, rather than leaning into this conservative brand of football, I'd rather just see them be ultra aggressive, trying to go out and win games with their offense.
Well, I mean, let's take a step back from that. I mean, the problem is that the reason the defense is as ranked as low is that look who the defense has played, and ultimately that's the problem, right? Is that defenses aren't the ones who are ultimately dictating a lot of that. I mean, there are definitely moments when there's styles make fight situations where the defense is the dictating force on offenses, but for the vast majority of NFL games, NFL offenses dictate how good defenses are playing, right? So the Cowboys need to get out of this mindset that, can the defense make a play when necessary? Can the defense?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Look at the Seattle game.
Very good at that. Yeah. But I think in order for that to work as, kind of a team win concept, the Cowboys have got to continue to put pressure on the other team's offense to score points. So like this,
and that's why that fumble was such a bummer. I wish I could just see what the game would have looked like if the Cowboys scored that opening drive touchdown, because I loved Mike McCarthy's aggressiveness early in that game, from taking the ball after winning the coin toss, like getting the ball, going down the field.
Yes.
He converted multiple fourth downs on that drive. I just wonder how different that game would have been and how different Mike McCarthy's play calling might have been if they score that opening drive touchdown.
Yeah. I think it's a valid point. I mean, simply because I think the situational play calling can be problematic at times, but I think overall what we saw in the Miami game, as far as like the way they attacked it, the way that they approached the game, I think those were all positive steps in the right direction. It's just things got off track. Now we've got to stop things from going off track. And I don't mean stop bad things from happening. I mean, stop reacting poorly when bad things happen, right? In your play calling. But I think as far as like a game plan to attack good teams on the road, I think the Cowboys at least, prove to themselves that, hey, there is value in getting the ball first, being aggressive early, trying to put points on the board and play our style of game, because if we just secede to like the other team scoring or allowing them to kind of control the pace of the game, that's when the Cowboys kind of can get out of their skis.
Yep, I agree. Let's talk about a couple defensive players who maybe not shown up quite enough over the last few weeks. We will get to them next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had playing DFS because there's so many different players and stat projections to choose from. Plus, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in place even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, we've got a crossover show with Locked On Lions. It's going to be a lot of fun getting ready for that Saturday night football game. So make sure you tune in for that. Landon, you and I back on Friday to preview that one. All right, let's get to our last question here. And this one's from our good friend Goran. He's an everydayer. He wants to know, has Dorance Armstrong or Dante Fowler done enough to warrant a new deal at the end of the season? Or is it finally time for Sam Williams to step up and start getting third defensive end level reps?
We can talk about Dante Fowler. I think, he has been relegated basically to exclusively a pass rusher at this point. I think he's made some plays in the run at different points, but he's been kind of a very boom or bust player this season, right? Like just like offside, sacks, big plays, penalties.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of both for him. You've seen his name called a lot. He's seen his number
in good and bad ways.
In good and bad ways, right? Armstrong is almost the opposite, where he's actually had a very his best season of the year of his career, but very quietly, just kind of unnoticed and making a couple of big plays here and there as needed. I tend to think that the Cowboys should try to find a way to re-sign Armstrong and bring it back, just because he's such a glue guy, and I think that there's a real serious chance that if the Cowboys kind of continually just shed these guys, right, and try to hope on down roster drafting guys, that they're going to lose a little bit of their edge, right? And I think it's been valuable having guys like both Fowler and Armstrong. I could certainly see a conversation where you let Fowler go, you hope that Williams can take a bigger step to kind of fill that role and his role up a little bit. But for me, Armstrong is that guy who you can move around and make it fit anywhere. And he plays well. Like, I mean, do people even realize, like, he has 7 sacks this year? Like, that's weird. Like, because he didn't even notice it. That's the most he's had in his career.
On less than 400 snaps.
On less than 400 snaps. Like, and he plays everywhere. Like, he plays defensive end. They play him inside at tackle. Like, they basically move him where they basically move Parsons and Lawrence, and then wherever they need Armstrong to fill in so that you can move Parsons and Lawrence, they put Armstrong there, and he gives you good snaps. So I think that Armstrong's a guy that the Cowboys should consider bringing back. I don't know what his number is. And
so he signed the last year. The last deal was 2 years, I think $13.5 million. So, like $6.5, $7 million a year. I got to believe after the last 2 years, it's probably going to be creeping up to like $9 or $10 million a year. And that's where it gets tricky. Is Dorance Armstrong a $10 million a year player?
I could get $10 million a year out of Armstrong. Easy. I mean, if you wanted to get it out of him, you could put him on special teams. You could have him as your third defensive end. I guarantee you probably get $10 million worth of.
Well, let me put it compared to it, a couple different players. I got to believe that Stephon Gilmore would like to be back, and he's probably wants to get about $10 million a year. Would you rather play Gilmore 10 or Armstrong 10?
I think that's tough, man. I understand the name difference here, but like Gilmore is like, how many more years has Gilmore got left? You've got Deron Bland and Diggs coming back. I just think that, yeah, I mean, I understand what your point is.
How about
and
Tyler Biotish?
I'm okay with replacing Tyler Biotish, honestly.
I'm with you. The Gilmore one's really hard, especially with Diggs coming off an ACL, because it's like, man, Gilmore's been such a nice veteran.
And he's been
piece
good. Like, yeah, it's not like you don't want to re-sign him. I think I just think that this even by this question to me, like that the fandom underrates how good.
I don't disagree, but I also won't be surprised if the other teams are like, hey, he's too good to be the third edge rusher. Let's give him 11 million to be our edge too. You know,
honestly, that's what I think is going to end up happening, is that he's going to get a big contract that the general population of NFL fandom is going to be like, what? And we're all going to be like, yeah, guys, go turn on the tape. That's what he does. Like unlimited snaps. Like
I could see a team like Detroit who has an endless amount of cap space. Like, hey, we need somebody else to play opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. We don't want to spend 21 million on a guy. Let's go out and get somebody who's pretty reliable. There's Dorance Armstrong, 26 years old, plug and play starter. Like I could see that happening pretty easily.
26 years old and he's played like, couple thousand snaps. Like, I mean, the guy's like 26 years old. He's been in the league 6 years. It's crazy.
This is his. He'll be going into year 7, and he's 26 years old.
Year 7, he's 27. Yeah, that's totally nuts.
And the other thing that we should mention, because I do think this is going to factor into part of his equation when it comes to free agency, is he plays on every single special teams unit. And the last time I checked, he was still a top 5 graded special teams player.
Yeah.
According to PFF, he was number 1 last year. That's instantly going to bring another $1 million, $2 million to his salary, which makes this even harder. If he ends up becoming a $12 million player, what do the Cowboys do? I don't know.
That, I mean, again, which is why I was like, yeah, I'll get $10 million out of him right now. Yeah. Sign that deal. So, like, I don't have any problem with doing it. It's about whether or not the Cowboys can afford it.
And it depends. It really probably depends on how you feel about the other players down the line. Like we didn't mention Sam Williams, but he's somebody that could potentially get more snaps. Maybe Chauncey Golston plays more snaps as a base defensive end. Maybe Fajoku, who you drafted. Maybe the Cowboys like Tyrus Wheat, maybe more than we do. Yeah. But that's the part of the equation
sure does. It seems like it sure seems like the league has interest in him at this point. So
that's
maybe he's got more to him than we realize.
The fact that Tyrus Wheat has been active like almost every game over the last 2 months makes me think that the Cowboys might be preparing him to be the next Dorance Armstrong, playing special teams, playing multiple positions, being a bigger defensive end. We'll see.
Like, yeah, I mean, it certainly makes some sense, and it certainly is. There's got to be a reason he's been the on roster game day inactive, or they've made him active a couple days, but there's got to be a reason that he's been on the roster this whole time, and I have to think it's because teams are sniffing around and kicking
over Fajoku too. Over Fajoku, I mean, Fajoku has a ankle injury, but it was Tyrus Wheat that was playing over him anyway. So
that's right. Yeah.
Something to keep in mind. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the podcast on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. We will see you right back here for Crossover Thursday on Friday. Landon and I breaking down Cowboys Lions. Can't wait. Should be a bunch of fun.